Hi and welcome to this Editing in Davinci Resolve recap session. This video recap is split into two sections. In the first half, we'll go through the fundamentals of using the edit page, while you follow along and create a basic trailer for the film Age of Airplanes. In the second section, we'll look at a short narrative horror sequence, where you have the opportunity to practice and build on the editing techniques used in part 1. Then we'll also cover creating a basic audio bed and a rough mix for the sequence. The files you'll need for this lesson should have been sent to you previously, but if you need them or have any issues or queries, don't hesitate to contact me on my email. Now let's open Davinci Resolve and get started. Now you've opened Davinci Resolve, you'll be met with this screen. This is the project manager. This will show all of the Davinci Resolve projects on your system. For the first part of this lesson, we're just going to open a new project. You can do this in two ways, by clicking this new project icon, or alternatively by using this button at the bottom of the page. Now let's just name our project so we can begin. Now this is open, we can see the Davinci Resolve interface. In the lower center of the interface, you can see all the pages of Davinci Resolve. Right-click and hit Show Icons to show their names. Today we're going to be working entirely in the Edit page, so let's open that up. On the left-hand side of the page, we have our media pool, or our media manager. And you can see here that this can be expanded if you want to have more room. The entire interface can be closed using this top toolbar, which allows you to open up certain sections as you need them. Firstly, let's import some footage from our downloaded exercise files. Navigate to your Downloads folder and open up the 01 Editing in Davinci Resolve files. Firstly, let's just grab all of the video clips. So I'm just going to hit Command A to select all clips and physically drag them into the media pool. As these clips are different to the default project's frame rate, it's asking if we want to adapt our project frame rate to match these. In this case we do, so hit OK. You can do this yourself by going down to the bottom right hand corner of the interface and selecting the cog wheel. Here we can change our project's frame rate and resolution settings. Now let's grab our audio files from our download pack. Drag the audio folder underneath where it says Master in the media pool. When you do this, it will create a folder within the program. These are called bins. Bins are the names given to the folder structures inside this editing program. Let's create a footage bin. Right-click and name this bin footage. Now let's drop all of our video footage into this to keep it tidy. Clicking the master bin will take you to the top of the internal folder structure, where you can see the rest of your project's bins. If you want to change how your files are displayed in the media pool, use these three icons to select between icon view, file view, or a mix view. If you'd like to look at your footage more closely, you can click over to the media page. This page is a much larger version of the media pool, where you can see your bins and footage easily. As you can see in the center of the page is our source viewer. When we double click a clip, it will be loaded into the source viewer so we can scrub through and see what we're working with. In the icon view, you can also roll your mouse over a clip, which will scrub through and this will show up in the source viewer. If this isn't working for you, make sure that live preview is turned on. How Resolve manages your media is understanding where you've placed it on your hard drive. To keep your file working correctly, Resolve must know where your media is at all times. So for example, if I now move this footage folder from where I've placed it onto my desktop, you'll see that the clips will become unlinked. It's very easy to relink your clips, however. You just need to show the new file path to Resolve. To do this, you can either right-click in the media pool and select Relink Clips. Now you'll bring up the Finder window. Now I can tell Resolve where I've moved the clips to and it will relink. Now let's create another bin and call it Timelines. The space in which you compile and create clips and audio together within Davinci Resolve is called a timeline. There are two ways to make timelines. You can either make a preset one if you know the frame rate and resolution you're working in. To do this, head to File and select Create New Timeline. Here you can select the name of your timeline and the number of audio and video tracks you need. To make this quicker, we can also do this directly from the source viewer. So let's open up our footage folder and have a look at how we do that. Firstly, however, I'm just going to organize my media pool, so clicking this icon allows me to shift and adjust the order at which my files are shown in, and as these have been named using a numbering structure, I can just hit file name and that will put them in the correct ascending order. You can also use this button to pop down your media pool if you need more space to look at your clips. So now let's start to have a look at building our sequence. I'm just going to double click this clip, which is 01 Shoot the Real World, which is a short clip from an interview that we've got. You can see it's now loaded into the source viewer. So I can just hit the spacebar or the play icon to play through.
In this film, making a documentary about how the airplanes changed the world, it was really important to go out and shoot the real world and how the airplane is connecting and making all the things possible that I want to convey in the film.
It'll be much easier to find where he starts talking if we can see the waveform. So to do this, open up the contextual menu in the source viewer. Select the zoom audio waveform option, and now we can see that much clearer. So let's cut off the dead air from the start of this clip and mark an in point just before he says, "in this film."
So in this
So I'm nearly there, but I'm just going to use my right and left arrow keys to move the clip a single frame at a time. I'm happy with this mark, so I'm going to hit I on the keyboard to mark an in point. As you can see, this is updated in our source viewer.
In this film, making a documentary.
Now let's find our out point, and we're looking to end this clip just after he says the word possible.
Shoot the real world and how the airplane is connecting and making all the things possible that
So again, I'm just going to use the arrow keys to refine this out point and hit the O button on my keyboard to set my out point. You can see when I hover my mouse over this clip in the source viewer that two icons pop up. One is showing a video frame and the other an audio waveform. If I clicked and dragged from one of those, it would just drag in the audio or the video. However, I want to use both from this clip, so I'm just going to click anywhere else in the source viewer and drag that into my timeline. As you can see, when I drop this into my timeline area, two tracks are automatically created, one video track and one audio track. Additionally, the timeline file is created in the media pool. This by default is named Timeline 1, so let's rename it and call it Age of Airplanes. To rename a clip, just double click the name in the media pool. Timelines are marked with a small indication of a sequence at the bottom left of the clip, so you can tell them apart from your regular footage. Then drag this into the timeline folder we made earlier to keep our project tidy. So the other thing which has changed is now we can see our timeline's content in the timeline viewer. This viewer shows your timeline's video output.
in this film,
Now let's look at the timeline view options. Hitting this button will bring this up. Here we can activate stacked timelines so we can see more than one at once. We can show and hide our subtitle track as well as showing or hiding our audio waveforms. We can also change the icon view type, which will show or hide the preview file in the timeline. You can also use these sliders to extend and change the size of your audio and video tracks. To zoom in and out of your timeline, you can click the Command plus or Command minus shortcut, or use this slider to zoom in and out. You can also use these three shortcuts to jump to individual clips or your playhead position, as well as using the keyboard shortcut Shift-Z to jump all the way out or all the way in to your timeline. Okay, now we know how to navigate the interface, let's grab our next interview clip. So let's open the O2 if it were possible to shoot it clip. We're looking to find the in point at if it were possible.
it was very important that everything was real. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot.
So another way of looking through your clips quickly is by using the J, K and L shortcuts. J reverses your clip, K pauses it, and outplays your clip forward. Another useful feature of these shortcuts is when you hold down the K key, then hold J or L, your clip will play forward or backwards in slow motion, which can be really useful for fine-tuning your ins and out points. Okay, great, so now I've found my in point, let's find the out point. So I want this to be after the word real. Let's use these keys to find this out point.
Go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie. It was really important. Make the movie. It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real. But there's a few things. Everything was real. Real.
Okay, now I'm happy with the chosen length of my clip, let's put it into the timeline. But instead of just using drag and drop as we did before, let's put the playhead at the end of my clip, and a quick way to do this is by using the up and down arrows to jump between the ends of each clip you've got selected in your timeline. Then drag my clip from my source viewer into my timeline window. This will bring up the Edit Overlay menu. For now, let's just use the Insert option. This will insert this footage into your track from wherever your playhead is placed. And I'm just going to use the up and down keys on the keyboard to quickly jump to the start of my timeline. Okay, let's have a look at that.
In this film, making a documentary about how the airplanes changed the world, it was really important to go out and shoot the real world and how the airplane is connecting and making all the things possible. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie. It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
Okay, now that we've got the start of our edit, let's put some B-roll footage in. Let's have a look through our options. Okay, I think I'm going to go with this clip. Now I'm going to choose my in and out point for this clip, getting the moment where the plane starts to take off. So let's put our playhead in the middle of these two clips, and let's grab our B-roll footage and move it into the Edit Overlay menu. This time let's use the Insert Clip option. This will drop it in between the two clips and push them apart, as it's a non-destructive editing technique. Now would be a good time to have a play with these editing techniques and familiarise yourself with how they work.
Is connecting and making all the things possible. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie.
Okay, now let's look at adding another piece of B-roll footage into your timeline to break up this interview clip. And I want to split this clip up at the line, "It didn't make the movie." Again, I'm just going to use the left and right arrow keys to nudge my playhead frame by frame to find this cut. So I quite like this time-lapse clip that we're going to put in. So I'm just going to use the Insert option here, and this will split this particular clip down the middle, which splits it in half and pushes the interview clip to each end of the B-roll. Okay, so let's add another piece of B-roll into our sequence. I think this city time-lapse is nice, so let's open that up in the source viewer. So another way we can chop our clips down with more accuracy is by using the timecode selection at the top right of the source viewer. So let's click this timecode option and hit the plus key and put in 100, which is going to move it 1 second ahead. Okay, so let's mark that in point. And let's use the same process to find our out point. So say I want 3 seconds of this clip. So I'm just going to type in 300 to move it ahead 3 seconds, and hit O to mark that as an out point. This time I'm going to use the insert shortcut on the toolbar to have our clip drop straight into our timeline. So now let's have a look at how we can use the range selection tool within our timeline to precisely add another piece of B-roll. Let's put an in point in our timeline by hitting I on the keyboard at the start of this clip. Then we'll make an out point just after he says, "Go shoot it." Now that we have selected this area, when we make any edit, inserts or overwrites, it will only affect this selection inside the area. Anything that's in the darker grey will not be affected. Now let's find a piece of B-roll to add in. Let's grab the 04 jet clip. Starting roughly from where the wheels are about to enter the frame. Let's mark our in point here. You don't need to mark an out point, as this clip's longer than the range selection we've made within our timeline, so it's going to fill in from the in point up until the end of the selection. So as the B-roll track has audio, we need to make sure it doesn't get in the way of our interview. So if you click this button on your audio track, it will stop any audio being added in. As you can see, that's worked well. Just by deactivating that link from this audio track, it means it's only going to affect the footage. Okay, so let's have a look at how that looks.
If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie.
So now that all looks good to me. Let's reactivate it just by re-clicking the A1 button. So now let's look at speeding up our workflow by how we bring in multiple clips into the timeline. Firstly, let's find any 3 bits of B-roll footage and add an in and out point in their source viewer. Now we've chosen our B-roll clips, we're going to put them all at the end of the timeline. So let's put our playhead at the end of our clips and hit Alt-X to get rid of the selection in our timeline. To highlight these specific pieces of B-roll, hold Command and click each clip. Drag them to the Edit Overlay menu and choose Overwrite. You can now see that it's dropped each of these trimmed clips into the timeline. They are dropped in order from whatever is first in the folder's hierarchy. Now let's look at how we can replace a clip in our timeline without changing the length of your overall edit. To do this, you simply need to put your playhead over whichever clip you wish to replace. Let's replace this bit of B-roll. So I'm just going to zoom in so I can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to roll my playhead back to roughly the center of this clip. Now I think this will look better if I replace it with this clip of the water plane. So let's find where the action is in this clip, line it up, and simply hit the replace clip option in my toolbar. This button easily replaces your clip with whatever you've lined up in your source viewer.
If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, if it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie.
So now we can look at adding some music. So first I'm just going to add an audio track, and to do that you can see we just right click on the timeline and click add track. Okay, now we have our basic edit together, let's add some music. Open the audio folder and find the final music file for Age of Airplanes. When audio is loaded into the source viewer, you can look through it quickly using this slider. Now let's put that into our timeline. So instead of dropping it in, we can choose to make our second track our active track, or track 1, by clicking this icon. Now with my playhead at the start of the timeline, I can hit the insert button and it will drop right in. Let's have a listen to that.
In this film, making a documentary about how the airplanes changed the world, it was really important to go out.
So as you can hear, the music is much louder than the dialogue, so let's adjust our levels to even it out. Let's open up the Mixer tab at the top right of the interface. Now we can see both our audio tracks and their level, as well as our output channels. On the left hand side of each track, we can choose to solo or mute each track individually, using these two buttons.
And how the airplane is connecting. Really important to go out and
Firstly, let's have a look at our dialogue levels.
really important to go out and shoot the real world and how the airplane is connecting. And if we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real. Every shot was original.
Mostly it's fine, however there is an unwanted piece of audio here from the B-roll. Let's get rid of this. As it's linked to the video, we'll need to unlink it. To do this, you can right click and hit unlink. So generally, dialogue audio is mixed at around 13 to 10 decibels. Let's listen and see if our dialogue's hitting this level.
The weather wasn't right, it was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
So most of the dialogue is hitting this level, however this last piece is a bit quiet. To boost the level of an individual clip, you can just grab this level line in the timeline interface. Clicking this and dragging it up will boost this audio level. So now let's solo our music track and level that out. So let's start by pulling down the level on the track. That's still got a bit to come down, so let's use a different technique. Now using the mix interface, we can adjust the level of an entire track by using the fader that's next to it. The rough standard level for background music is around 20 dB, so let's play around with the scale and get that right. That looks more like it's in range, so let's have a listen.
In this film, making a documentary about how the airplanes changed the world, it was really important to go out and shoot the real world and how the airplane is connecting and making all the things possible. If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it. If we couldn't get the shot or the weather wasn't right, we would either go back to that location, stay at that location longer, or it didn't make the movie.
Okay, so as we can see our sequence is a bit long compared to the music, so let's cut this down to fit. So to do this, I'm going to speed up this lovely time-lapse clip. I'm just going to right-click this clip and hit Retime Controls. Now we can see the speed change icon that appears. So when you hover your mouse over the blue arrows, your mouse icon will change to this little black arrow set, and when you drag, this will retime the clip speed. So now I'm just going to click this dead space and delete it to close the gap. Let's have a look at how this plays out.
It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
So after reviewing this last shot seems a bit out of place, so I'm actually going to drop this. And I'd like to now add some digital movement into this time-lapse. So to do this, I'm going to bring up the Inspector tab. The Inspector is where you can show all the controls and parameters attached to each clip, be it transform controls or transitions and effects. So for this movement, we're just going to use the transform controls. I think a zoom out would work well on this shot. With our playhead at the start of the clip, I'm going to zoom in. I can click and drag this number to zoom in, or I can type in my desired value. Now we're going to create a keyframe to mark this value at this point in time in our clip. Press this button to create a keyframe. When we have any keyframes active on a clip, we will see this icon appear on the timeline. Now I'm going to rearrange my interface to give me a better view of the timeline. Now let's move our playhead to the end of our clip and zoom this back out. So when you've added a keyframe and you change the value of the zoom function at a different point in time, it will automatically add another keyframe at this point. This will be shown in the inspector when the keyframe icon turns red. You can easily switch between the last keyframe and the next keyframe by hitting the arrows in the inspector next to the keyframe icon. As you can see from this comparison, it's made that shot much more dynamic. If we click the keyframe icon on this clip, we can see our keyframes in a much more visual way. Here we can see our keyframes and an interpolation line between the two of them. New keyframes can be added to this line by clicking this icon. I think this shot can actually be a bit more dynamic, so I'm just going to select my first keyframe and zoom it in a little bit further. Yeah, I think that's looking much better. So we can use keyframes to animate a lot of options within Resolve. So now let's use keyframes to create an audio fade out of our music. Let's open up the keyframe interface in our music track and add 2 keyframes at the end of it. Now let's drag the second one down to slowly fade out the music. This can also be done for visuals as well, in exactly the same way, using the opacity control in the inspector in creating keyframes. Alternatively though, we could just use a transition, which would be much quicker. To do this, open up the effects library and grab the cross dissolve transition. Now I can drop that onto my clip and easily create a fade. The length of this can be adjusted just by dragging the dissolve to make it longer or shorter. Further controls of this effect can be found in the inspector, where you can adjust your cross dissolve as well as the keyframe interpolation or easing. Okay, so that's it for this section of the lesson. So we're just going to save this and close it down. Then open up the exercise files for today's lesson. So let's open up the O2 Editing and Mixing Horror Scene folder. Then open up the EX2 Davinci Resolve project folder. When this is open, we can double-click the FS Student Project file. This ends with the extension DRP, which stands for Davinci Resolve Project. This should now open up this Davinci Resolve project for you. If it comes up with unlinked media, then follow the same process as shown earlier in the video. So this project contains a short horror sequence which has been shot externally for educational purposes. I've chopped it down into the shots from each scene. Each clip holds all the available takes for each shot. For this portion of the lesson, what I'd like you to do is build up a narrative sequence using this supplied footage. I've numbered the scenes from 1 to 4 so you can see the order in which the film was intended to be edited in. However, this section is for you to interpret. Use the skills that we've been building while creating the Age of Airplane sequence to build up your horror scene timeline. I'm going to go through some further techniques and you can follow along with me if you'd like, or use this footage to explore the program a bit further and get used to editing in Davinci Resolve. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to my timeline folder and open up the exercise 2 Build a Sequence timeline, which is empty and ready for me to start my edit. Starting with the opening scene, I'm going to find a clip of our antagonist creeping through the parking lot. Now I've trimmed my clip, I'm going to insert it into my timeline. So I think I'm going to use this moment where the camera passes this machine, which I think will work well for a transition. So to cut this clip up, this time I'm going to use the blade tool. It's pretty obvious what this is for. It cuts your clips in half, or wherever you have your playhead placed on your timeline. It's located here on the toolbar, but it can also be accessed with a shortcut by pressing B on your keyboard. Now let's find our next clip of our character popping up into frame. So I'm going to drop this into my timeline and add a cross dissolve to bridge these gaps together. Okay, so now I've introduced the two characters, I'm going to start to build some tension in this sequence by adding in a wider variety of shots. I'm going to grab some close-ups of the two characters to build the moment he spots our protagonist. Firstly, let's grab a shot of the villain, and I'm just going to place it after she's just jumped into frame. Now for this, I don't want to use the audio, so I'm just going to grab the footage and use the place on top edit function, which just drops it onto a new track. So I'm going to create a match on action cut as she turns out to look at the guy in the hazmat suit. So let's have a look through and find the close-up that we want to use. So now let's drop this in. And I've made my selection quite long here. So I'm just going to trim this down again using the blade tool. And to find my out point for this cutaway, I'm just going to grab the end of my clip and drag it in. As you can see in the timeline viewer, a 2-up display appears when I'm shortening this clip, which is really helpful to find this match. So I think I want to long this out a little bit. I'm going to cut this shot up using the blade tool and insert another couple of cutaways of our antagonist. So let's find a medium shot of him. Okay, now I'm happy with my selection. I'm just going to insert this into my timeline and then grab a close-up to put in. And I want to reuse this close-up. So you might think it's a good idea to double-click the clip in the timeline and bring it into the source viewer to make a new selection. However, as this clip has been put into the timeline already, if I make a new selection of it in the source viewer, you're actually telling Resolve you want to change the area of the clip you've chosen. As soon as you can see it tries this and ruins the shot. So I'm just going to hit Command Z to undo this. So if I want to make a new shot of the same clip, I'm going to double click it from the media pool instead and find the moment when his head snaps around. Okay, now that's on our timeline. Let's look at refining our clip. So if I just zoom in a little bit here. So for this clip, I'm simply going to drag it over the other footage to get that match cut. And something that's going to help me here is by using snapping. So snapping can be turned on and off by using this magnet icon. So what snapping does is when you drag a clip near your playhead or near a part at the end of a clip or where there's like a hard edge, it will automatically snap to this position. So by clicking this magnet icon on and off, it will turn snapping on and off. And as you can see, with it snapping on, that was much quicker. Okay, so let's just close these gaps and have a look at how our edit's doing. Okay, so I think we need a reaction shot here to show her expression before she starts to run away. So let's grab that and put it in. Okay, so I'm happy with that selection, so I'm just going to insert that into my edit. Okay, so now the opening scene is looking good. Let's have a look at scene 2, the chase sequence. Okay, so there isn't a lot of coverage of this scene, and we've only really got one entrance point for the characters and one exit point. So we have to find a way to put these two clips together. So I'm just going to trim these down to what I think will work and put them into my timeline.
Action.
Okay, so this cut isn't working. So we're going to have a look through our footage and see where we can match this as best we can. So I think if I pull that back a little bit earlier in this clip and get to a point where she's running, I can probably match that to another point in the next clip. Okay, so now I've got that roughly matched. Let's have a look. Okay, that's looking alright. Bit jump cut as everything's from the same angle, but that's all they've shot for this sequence. So let's have a look at what's next to bring into our chase sequence. Okay, so we've got this tripod shot which follows them as they run all the way towards the camera and past it. So let's grab a section of this that we like and pop it into our timeline. So let's drag it in and see how it looks. So to me that looks a bit of a weird cut now, as the other character's still left on screen. So I want to just extend this middle shot. If I tried to extend this shot using the cursor or the selection tool, you can see it just rolls over my next clip, which I don't want to do, as I'm happy with my start point. So instead of using the selection tool, I'm going to use the trim edit mode tool, which is here on the toolbar. Now what this allows me to do is to drag out the clip, and instead of destructively rolling over the next one, it pushes it forward. Okay, now that that's done, let's have a look at our cut. Okay, so that cut works better now. However, I think this is quite a long shot on its own. We need to build in some pace. It is, however, the only angle of this area, so I'm going to pull in some other clips from this shot to improve this section. So this time, we're going to use a different function of the trim edit mode tool to refine these cuts and see if we can make it work. So as you can see, we're trying to match cut on her head movement as she turns around. So with the trim edit mode tool active, if you place this in the center of a clip instead of at the end, it will slip through your current footage. This means you're just changing the area of footage which is shown without actually moving your edit points on the timeline. Also, when using this tool, a full window up display is brought up into the timeline viewer. The bottom two windows show the previous clip's last frame and the next clip's first frame, while the top two windows show your new start and end frames for the footage that you're moving. Okay, so let's have a look at that edit now. And that's looking much better. Now let's see how the next edit point's looking. And this isn't quite matching up. So here I'm just going to use exactly the same tool and just slip this back till it lines up. And there we are, that's looking much better. And I'm just going to extend this shot so we can see them all going out of frame, and let's have a look at scene 3. So scene 3 opens with the characters running up the stairs into a hallway. So I'm just going to grab a couple of these close-ups of her running up the stairs, and use the selection and trim and edit mode tools to create the start of this sequence. Okay, so the next shot I want to use covers her running into the hallway and up to the glass door. As you can see in the shot, there is a mistake which needs fixing. The second camera crew can be seen in the left-hand side of the frame. So first off, let's add in a cutaway to try and cover up as much of this problem as possible. However, we can still see this in the shots. So to fix this, I'm going to use the dynamic zoom function. Using this, I'm going to start the shot zoomed in on the door and gradually pull out. And by the time we get to the end of the shot, our actress will be covering up the crew. To activate dynamic zoom, I'm going to open this clip up in the inspector and turn on dynamic zoom. Now just selecting this on its own will create an auto zoom, which lasts the duration of the clip. To make it easy to affect and manipulate, we need to bring up the dynamic zoom overlay in our timeline viewer. To do this, click the overlay menu on the bottom right of the timeline viewer and select dynamic zoom. You can now see two frames on your timeline viewer, a red frame and a green frame. The green is your starting frame and the red is your end frame. So now all we need to do is adjust these frames to create that zoom movement to cover up the mistake from set. As you can see, this is a really easy way to animate zooming movement within your timeline. Okay, so now I've had a bit of a play and got that sorted out. We can see that it's just covered up that mistake and works really well. So from here I invite you to finish up the rest of the sequence if you've been following me, or to continue to create your own for as long as you need. For the next part of this lesson, we're just going to open a different timeline with a finished edit, and we need to open up the EX203 adding audio and sound effects file. In this sequence, we're going to go through how we put in a basic audio bed and to add some sound effects. Firstly, we want to organise our audio tracks. I think the easiest way to do this is to organise them by name and colour. To rename a track, just double click the name and replace it. All of the camera audio from the sequence within the dream has been left in track 1, and all of the audio from after the dream is left in track 2, so I'm going to name these respectively. Now I'm going to create two sound effects tracks in audio tracks 3 and 4. To keep these visually obvious in our timeline, I'm going to change the colour of this track to teal, again just by right clicking the track and choosing this colour. To add a new track, just right click and hit add. Finally, I'm going to make a music track and an Atmos track and give them two different colours. So let's start putting some audio in. The first piece I'm going to use is Riser 1, a sound clip from the audio and sound effects folder. Just drag it into the start of my edit. And now let's have a listen to see how this sounds. So that builds up nicely. Now I think I want the music to kick in when the axe murderer sees the protagonist. So let's jump back to the audio folder and select our music track. So I want this to kick in on the first beat. So I'm going to make an in point and drop it into our timeline. And let's have a listen to how this sounds together. Okay, so my system is lagging a bit on playback there, but I think the music works well on the whole for this chase sequence. For the start of the hallway sequence though, I want the music to drop out so we can just hear her struggling with the door. So let's chop the rest of this track off. I'm now going to use a track named Deceleration and insert that into our music bed. Now just by adding this in, you can hear there's a cut in the audio here. So I'm just going to zoom this in and chop it down to see if I can make this match a bit better. So to smooth this out, I'm going to use an audio transition. So let's open up the effects library and grab a cross dissolve. Now we can place this in between the two clips to smooth it out. Let's have a listen. Okay, so I want to bring some music back in on the next cut to start build up some tension in the sequence when she's in danger. So let's have a look through the music and find a point that works well. I think the end of this crescendo works well, so I'm going to put an in point here. Now let's put that into our timeline and have a listen to how it sounds. Okay, so there are a couple of things I need to do to make this audio transition from the dream to her waking up work. Firstly, I'm going to add in the sound effect that will build up to where the dream ends. Then I need to do some overlapping in the camera audio, so her scream isn't cut off when it cuts between shots. So let's grab the sound effect named 08 Intense and bring it into our timeline. Now let's line it up so it finishes when she snaps out of the dream. Okay, that's roughly in place, so let's sort the scream and cat effect. So these are both linked currently to each piece of footage. However, there is a quick way to unlink this footage and drag out the audio to manipulate it. To do this, hit the link icon, which you can see in the toolbar. This will quickly unlink all the footage and audio in your timeline and allow you to move them around freely. So I'm going to extend the scream out backwards so she starts screaming as he raises the axe. Now I want to blend this scream into the sound of the kettle to help bridge this sequence together. So to do this, I'm going to grab the audio crossfade transition. Now I'm happy with how this fades together. I'm going to delete the bit of audio that I don't need and move it up to my first track. And the level of this clip's just super low, so I'm just going to grab this level line here and raise it up to help match it in. Okay, so I think we need to blend this kettle audio into the noise of her waking up as well. But this time let's just add some keyframes on both tracks to create this manually. So I'm just going to extend out both of my tracks so they overlap properly. Then we can come into the inspector and add a couple keyframes on the volume at the end of this clip. Now let's open the keyframe editor for this clip. So now I can lower the volume of the second keyframe so it goes to 0. So as a default, the speed at which it moves between these two keyframes is set to linear. You can use these buttons in the keyframe panel to adjust how this ramps down. You now get this little handle that appears on the keyframe that allows you to change the speed at which this ramps down. Now I'm happy with that, so let's do the same process to the next clip. Let's have a listen to all of this together now. Okay, so I think that rising sound effect we added in earlier needs to be a bit later to really give the impact when she's shook out of the dream. So let's adjust that. Okay, that works better. So now we've entered our final scene. There is one last sound effect to add in and some Atmos before we start mixing. Let's have a listen to this kitchen scene and see what needs to be added in.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit.
So this sequence is sounding quite dead, as there's no Atmos in the background to help fill the scene out. So let's grab the kitchen room tone track and place it onto a timeline from the moment that we enter the kitchen.
Hey. Hey.
So the last thing we need to add before we mix this audio is the sound effect of the water pouring into the teacup. Grab the pouring water effect from the audio folder, and let's drop that into our timeline.
Hey. Hey.
And I'm going to chop it down and use the trim edit mode tool to slip through until the audio fits well into place. So this is a bit of a hard insert without the fade on each end of the audio. In Resolve, you can make a crossfade out quickly in the audio by using these handles at the edge of your clip, just by clicking and dragging them. Let's do that to our water sound effect.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest.
Okay, now that's done and our audio is in our timeline, we're just going to have a go at mixing it. So you can either mix the audio that you've put in, or you can use the backup timeline that I've made in case you want a fresh starting point. And that's again just in the timeline folder, and it's just called EX204 Mixing Audio. Okay, now we have our audio in place in our timeline, let's go through and do a basic audio mix of this sequence. Firstly, let's open up our mixer panel. Now we have more than 2 tracks to work with, we can drag out the rest of them by clicking and dragging the left side of the panel. So as we can hear, our music is super loud, so let's bring that down a bit. And our in-camera audio is extremely variable in volume. So we can solve this audio issue by using a process called normalizing. When you do this, you are telling Davinci to make a loudness or perceived sound of a group of clips the same. To do this, we're just going to click and drag a selection around the clips that we want to normalize. These are all the clips in the first track. Then we're going to right click and select normalize clips. Now we're going to make sure this is set to -9 and hit normalize. This will balance out the audio of each clip to make it sound roughly the same. This process is most commonly used in dialogue mixing, so all the dialogue within a scene sounds the same volume to the audience. And as we can hear when we solo that track, the volume range is much more acceptable. So let's have a listen to this transition and see what we need to change. So this next bit of dialogue or in-camera audio is now far too loud, so I'm just going to use the same process and quickly normalize this so it matches. Okay, so that sounds much better. So let's have a look at how the kitchen sequence is sounding.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a.
So as you can hear, the dialogue here is really quiet and the Atmos way too loud. So we're just going to do the same process for the dialogue, jump in and normalize that up to make it sound about the same level and to boost it up.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit and he had an axe and he was chasing me, and it's like no matter what I could do, I just couldn't get away from this guy. Finally, we went up these stairs and he had the axe and he was about to do me in, and then I woke up.
It's terrible. You need this more than I do.
Okay, so that's sounding better, but I'm now just going to play the track and drag down the Atmos to get it to a less intrusive level.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit and he had an axe and he was chasing me, and it's like no matter what I could do, I just couldn't get away from this guy. Finally, we went up these stairs and he had the axe and he was about to do me in, and then I woke up.
That's terrible. You need this more than I do.
Okay, that's better, but I think I'm actually going to keep dragging it down so it's not so much in the way.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit and he had an axe and he was chasing me, and it's like no matter what I could do, I just couldn't get away from this guy. Finally, we went up these stairs and he had the axe and he was about to...
Okay, that's sounding a lot less intrusive and much more realistic. Okay, let's have a listen through and bring down our music tracks. That's still very loud. Okay, her breaths there are still quite loud, so I'm just going to drag that individual clip down a little bit.
Hey. Hey. I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit and he had an axe and he was chasing me, and it's like no matter what I could do, I just couldn't get away from this guy. Finally, we went up these stairs and he had the axe and he was about to do me in, and then I woke up.
That's terrible. You need this more than I do.
Okay, so we're nearly there. So now we just need to address this problem bit of audio we've got. So we've got some mic scratching going on in this clip. Probably won't get rid of it entirely, but we can see if we can reduce it down so it's not so obvious. Maybe it could be mistaken for bed rustle. So to do this, you just need to go to your effects library and find noise reduction, and we're just going to drag that onto our clip. Then we're just going to open up the Inspector tab and click the Effects window. So what we're trying to do here is grab that area of rustle noise, and the noise reduction process is going to suppress that sound for us. So we're just going to put our playhead just before the rustle noise starts, hit this learn icon, and then play for a second or so, then stop and unhit learn. And now it'll know that's the audio level and frequency that it needs to suppress. So let's have a listen to see how that's done. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely helped. You can also hit the noise only box. This will just play back the audio that it's suppressing. Okay, now that's sounding a little bit better. Let's have a listen through and see if we want to change anything else.
Hey.
Hey, I just had the weirdest dream ever. I was in this warehouse and there was this maniac in a yellow suit and he had an axe and he was chasing me, and it's like no matter what I could do, I just couldn't get away from this guy. Finally, we went up these stairs and he had the axe and he was about to do me in, and then I woke up.
That's terrible. You need this more than I do.
Okay, so my music was still a touch loud, so I reduced that there, but now I'm happy with how that's sounding. So now let's just quickly go through exporting our video. So for this we need to go to the delivery page at the bottom right of our interface. Here we can see there's an in and out point selection covering our entire sequence. I can use this toggle to jump between my in and out points or to render the entire timeline. Up on the left hand side of the interface we can see our export settings. For this I'm just going to use a YouTube preset. This is where we name our file, and underneath where we choose our file's location. Hit browse to open up the Finder window. I'm just going to save this to my desktop. When you're happy with the export settings, just hit add to render queue, and then hit render all on the right hand side of the page. You will now see this render. When this is finished, you will find an exported video file in your desired location. I hope you enjoyed this recap of Davinci Resolve. If you have any questions or queries, my email is on screen now.